The things that the devil does and the things that the devil can do. Wayne, if you'll click on that top screen for me one time, I think we'll be ready to go. Just click there one time. That's good. Thank you. I got it from there. Let's look at Ephesians chapter 6, verse 11. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. Do we know about temptation? Everybody knows about temptation. And everybody understands that your temptation may not be your neighbor's temptation. What may tempt them may not tempt you, but the devil is crafty enough to be able to tempt everybody at their weakest point. And so while something may not tempt you, it may tempt someone else. And people say, well, how does the devil work? How does the devil work? You know, we talk about a wolf in sheep's clothing. In a little bit, we want to talk about the devil in snake's clothing as he made his pitch toward Eve and finally got Eve and Adam both in the process of temptation because they yielded to what the devil was asking them to do. I think the better question for us to understand, we may not really ever understand the devil. And the reason I'd say that is, why would anybody intentionally want to do the wrong thing? In the course of time and in the course of history, one of the mysteries of mankind is the understanding of being able to do the right thing, yet choosing to do the wrong thing. Now, here's the deal. Every one of us have done the wrong thing unless we're too little to know what I'm talking about. I mean, the Bible says it. All have sinned, come short of the glory of God, so we recognize that. And the thing about all of this is that we may never understand the way the devil works, and so we can't understand the devil, then we need to figure out about temptation. Because if we can't understand the devil, if we can understand temptation, then we're going to be way down the road in this process and trying to defeat sin and try to defeat Satan. Because what Satan wants is for you and I to go to hell. I mean, that's his goal. That's his aim. That's what he, if you want to say it this way, that's what he gets up every morning to be sure of. He wants to be sure if he can do anything to help us go in the wrong direction or to give us an option. And you know, that's all temptation is. Temptation is just an option. We know what God wants, and so the devil offers something else. We know what Jesus wants, and so the devil just wants to offer something else. For you see, Jesus said you cannot serve. You remember that in the Sermon on the Mount? You cannot serve God and mammon. Now, if you want to put that in a little bit easier understanding translation, you can't serve God and anything else. Put anything else after the word and. You can't serve God and put whatever you want to put in the blank, and it's impossible to serve God and something else. Now, Paul talks about the part of us that we need to understand the best. In our effort to be more godly, in our effort to be what God would have us to be, understanding this side of things is going to really make it easier for us to understand this process. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 3, he talks about the passionate desires and inclinations of our sinful nature. Now, God did not create sinners. God created people who have the ability to choose. God did not create sinners. He created people who have the opportunity to reason. God did not create sinners. He created people, giving them the ability to think. And what the devil wants to do in this process, he wants to interrupt our thinking or our reasoning and helping us then make the wrong choice. Now, it's awesome, if you really want to think about it, that God gave us a choice. It took all the power that God had in his being. It took all the power that he had to create people who might not choose him. Have you ever thought about that? That when God created man in the beginning, when He formed man from the dust of the ground, when He breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul, with that breath of life, man also gained the opportunity to reason, to think, and to choose, God knowing that he might not choose him. And so these passionate desires and inclination of our sinful nature. Sometimes when we see the word passionate, we sometimes want to think in the direction of the sexual parts of life. And obviously, certainly, surely they are. But there are other things that people can be so passionate about them that they'll take away from God just like the other. And so you may say, well, I don't have any of those kinds of problems. You may not. But you may have some other kind of problems that you need to identify. Anything that you're so passionate about that you would choose it instead of God. Paul's talking about you in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 3. The passionate desires, the inclinations of our sinful heart. We need to recognize those, and we need to understand them. I know the words are little, but these are verses that we recognize that we'll understand quickly. You remember, as John was writing in 1 John chapter 2, do not love this world nor the things it offers you. Now think in your mind, what does this world offer us? Just in your mind, what is it that this world offers us? Somebody the other day in Bible class was talking and said, where we live, we can have just about everything that we want. And we can't we? Where we live, the majority of the people that we know can have just about everything that we want. And you know, you and I, we can fall so in love with the things that we have that we can start to love those things more than we love God. And that's the point, that's the message today. When we talk about the devil's tricks or the devil's schemes, use the old word, the wiles of the devil, we're not necessarily talking about somebody that walks up in your face and says, boo. We're talking about the devil's tricks and the devil's schemes that would lure us away. Isn't that what James talks about? Each man is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. And John says, don't love this world. We sing that song. This world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. You know, if God were going to give you, if He were going to give you a little bit of a heads up and say, okay, this is going to be the day that you're going to die. And you've got a little bit of time to get things ready and get things together. And He said, I'll let you bring one thing with you. If God were going to give us that option, if He were going to say, you can bring one thing with you, one thing now, what would you go get? In some cases, and I don't know what any of you thought, but in some cases, did you know that one thing that you might go get, if God were going to let you bring something with you, might be just the thing that'll keep you from getting to go with Him? If you really think about it, if you really get it in your mind, it's really possible that you or I might have something that's our favorite thing, that, I'm going to get to bring that with me. That one thing might be the thing that'll keep us from getting to go with God. He said, do not love what? Do not love the world. What's easy to do, though, isn't it? It's easy to do. I could make a list and I could say, do you love that? Love it. Yeah, I love that. Well, yeah, I love that. Well, what about, I love that too. And we could make a pretty good list of things. Remember, we're trying to figure out temptation here. We're never going to understand the devil, but if we can understand temptation, then we'll be able to defeat him more times than he defeats us. Do not love this world. nor the things that it offers you. For when you love the world, you do not have the love of the Father in you. For the world offers only a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and pride in our achievements and possessions. These are not from the Father, but are of the world, or from this world. And the world is fading away, along with everything that people crave. But anyone who does what pleases God will live forever. You may remember it like this. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, the pride of life, they're not of the Father, they're of the world. And the world passes away, and the lust thereof, but he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. That's probably the way you remember it best. But when you start to try to understand the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eye and the pride of life, what does that mean? What does one of those have to do with the other, and what do any of them have to do with us? Well, let's break it down in three simple things here. Something that we can understand. The lust of the flesh. Let's talk about that from our body's perspective. And I recognize the group that we have here in this auditorium, and I recognize that, and I'm going to try to be careful. But at the same time, to be able to communicate, I want to be sure I'm communicating, so bear with me, and I'll do the best I can. Well, when we talk about the lust of the flesh, there are going to be some things that have to do with our physical nature, that physical part of us. And if you start to kind of try to break down this part of what he says, the lust of the flesh, when you start to break that down, then what is he talking about? Well, he's talking about food. And I think it's interesting here. You remember when Jesus was talking about people, what people worry about? You remember, don't worry, in Matthew chapter 6, and he finally culminates all that by saying, seek ye first the kingdom of God. You remember that section? And one of the things that he talks about in that section is what people worry about. And what is it that they worry about? What are we going to eat? What are we going to drink? And what are we going to wear? And the idea of that can be very frightening. So when it comes down to our body, then what are we talking about? Well, something else is this three-letter word. And it drives a lot of what we do today as far as advertisements are concerned. And so you've got food and you've got sex, and then you've got the thrill of life. And obviously there are going to be some things that won't fit into this category. But there are going to be some things that are going to be so edgy that you're going to be outside of the fold of safety and trying to experience them. So the lust of the flesh. Well, what about the lust of the eye? Well, if we take the lust of the flesh, we talk about the body, then let's talk about the soul maybe a little bit here. The lust of the eye, that part of us that makes this connection. And really, I think it probably boils down to the things that we see and the things that we want and the things that we crave. And so we might talk about some of these kinds of things, clothes and money and entertainment, and how, boy, doesn't that drive a lot of our society today? Just those three things. So the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and then let's let the pride of life, let's let that kind of link to the spirit. And I know you say, well, now, wait a minute, what's the difference between the soul and the spirit? I'm talking about that part of the soul necessarily that we think about maybe be more of the person that thinks about being here, and the spirit would be more like the soul that you and I might think about typically. And so that part that drives us from within, that might would seek praise, or that might would seek power, just can't live without it, or recognition as a result of something. And can't you see, and thinking about that, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, the pride of life, can't you see how those three things connected the body and the soul and the spirit. If the devil can give us something that's going to appeal to one of those three things, then we may leave God and start walking in the wrong direction. You know, that happens a lot. And it happens to most of us. If we're old enough to understand this process and have these thoughts, we've got to recognize, we've got to understand, we've got to admit. Remember years ago in basketball, if the referee blew the whistle and they pointed at you, David, when you played basketball and the referee blew the whistle and he pointed at you for a foul, what did you do? Raise your hand. Acknowledge, that was me. That don't happen so much anymore. Referee blows the whistle, they point at you, and you either go, or you point at somebody else. No. What if God did that? What if God did that? If when I sin, when I do the wrong thing, if God kind of blew the whistle, He pointed at me, I did do that, and I'm sorry. That's not our society. That's not our society. Our society says, or, hey, they're doing it too. So recognizing temptation. I love the words that Paul used in Romans chapter 6. He said, do not let sin what? Everybody say it loud. Do not let sin what? Control you. Do not let sin control the way you live. Do not let the devil take his hands and put them around your throat. Do not put the devil's bridle on your head, and don't let him put the things in your mouth that are going to make the difference. Don't put the devil's bit between your teeth, because if he gets his bit between your teeth, then you're going to be doing what he wants you to do. Do not let sin control the way you live. Do not give in to sinful desires. Do not let any part of your body become an instrument of evil to serve sin. Instead, now did you hear that list? Do not. He says, instead, give yourselves, how? Give yourselves completely to God. Brethren, one of the big deals today in a lot of Christians' hearts, they don't mind holding hands with God. They can sing, hand in hand we walk each day. But their deal is, I want to hold hands with God and I want to hold hands with the world. You can't hold hands with both. You can't hold hands with both. When we were in the second or third grade, I had a little sweetheart. Our teacher, we had square desks with chairs that scooted in and out. And she put us in these 4-desk system here, and my desk would face this desk, and there'd be a desk beside mine, and then a desk that would be facing that, all 4 together in a little quad there. It worked out perfect that I was sitting right across from my little sweetheart. She had a black fuzzy coat, and every day at nap time, she'd put that black fuzzy coat up on her desk. And I couldn't wait for nap time, because I knew as soon as that coat came up on that desk, and I was going to run my hand down that sleeve and hold hands with her during nap time. That's all I could think about at nap time. I couldn't sleep because I was holding my sweetheart's hand. It really hurt me in math and arithmetic and English and everything else too, to be frank with you. But I like that little setup on the desks. And when you get something on your mind, if that's all you think about, then you think about all that you're not thinking of. That's what the devil wants. He wants you to think about this so that you won't think about all the other things that you need to be thinking about. He said, instead, give yourselves completely to God. Don't get sidetracked. Don't go in the wrong direction. Don't follow the devil. He said, you've already been there. He said, you were dead, but now you have a new life. So use your whole body as an instrument to do what is right for the glory of God. Probably something that we recognize a little quicker than that is let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Same concept. Understanding the wiles of the devil and making and having the realization that we're not our own people anymore. As Christians, we can't live for God and live for the devil. The devil is an unwelcome guest. God lives inside of you. You heard about the little boy that went to the doctor. And the doctor was wanting to listen. He said, let me get my stethoscope. I'm going to see if I can hear Barney. He said, let me see if I can hear Barney. You know, Barney the dinosaur. So he's listening to, I'm going to see if I can hear Barney. Let me see if I can hear Barney. And that little kid finally got tired of hearing him say something about Barney. He said, listen, Barney's on my underwear. Jesus is in my heart. You know, that's right. That's right. If somebody's listening, they need to be listening for Jesus, not Jesus and anybody else or anything else. Paul said it. Don't you realize that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who lives in you? He was given to you by God. You don't belong to yourself. God bought you. That really gives me chills. God paid the price. He bought us. He bought us. He wants to live inside of us. He wants to spend eternity with us. You don't belong to yourself. God bought you with a high price. What was the price? Somebody tell me, what was the price? Yeah, what I told you, the blood. What you knew already. That should take our breath away, shouldn't it? That should take our breath away. Somebody's fixing to kill you. And somebody says, no, kill me instead. But you're guilty. Kill me instead. This person, they're the one that committed the wrong. Well, kill me instead. You take that and then you multiply it by the number of sinners that's ever lived, and think about not just somebody stepping in our place, but somebody offering their son. Offering their son in our place. You don't belong to yourself. You don't belong to yourself, for God bought you with a high price. So you must honor God with your body. The big problem in all of this is that we don't see sin from God's perspective. God cannot be where sin is. When Christ was hanging on the cross, God turned his back on his own son because his son was carrying all of our sin. The son even turned black. The veil of the temple was rent. God cannot stand sin. Sometimes we want to treat sin like a baby skunk. If a skunk walked in this building, what would you do? Somebody say it. What would you do if a skunk walked in the back of this building back there? What would you do? No, you wouldn't sit here with it, would you, Philip? Which direction would you go? I mean, this way, right? Keith's pointing this way. You don't want to go that way. Why? Because the skunk's back there. I'm going to tell you what. If a baby skunk walked in back there, you know what we'd do? Oh, isn't he cute? Oh, somebody, we need, oh, how, oh, isn't he sweet? You know why I know that? Drew and I were driving. Not on Brother Selton and Sister Jenny's road, but on the road before that. You come out over there at Sister Louise Ashley's, whatever number that is. If you cut across up here, and it's the house on the left there that has the swimming pool that has a chain link fence, and they put something through it. Really nice looking place there. Really pretty front yard. Drew and I were driving through there one day, and there was a baby skunk out there. You'll never guess what we did. I put my car in park, and I said, "Oh, Drew, run out there and pick up that baby skunk." He ran out there and got him in his baseball hat, and he brought him back to the truck. And you know, that baby skunk was as cute as anything I've ever seen. He was just as soft. Everything was going fine. You know, a baby skunk smells just like a big skunk. And poor old Drew, he had to wear that hat the rest of the year. We thought we had done a good thing. We had rescued a baby skunk. You know, that's the way sometimes we want to treat sin. Oh, that looks so good, and that looks so, oh, I just got to. I'll promise you that's not God's perspective. That's not God's perspective. When you see what the Bible has said about hell, you'll know God is not kidding when it comes to sin. Yeah, we see a wolf in sheep's clothing, but in the story of Adam and Eve, we see the devil in snake's clothing. And here's the thing. I want you to look at that story. We've always just kind of hit the high spots and bounced on down the deal here. But I want you to look at that story, because as you see the way the devil unfolded that deal there, did God tell you not to eat of all the trees of the garden? We can eat of all the trees of the garden except this one. Well, why can't you eat of that one? Well, he said, we'll die. You're not going to die. God just made you. See, what Eve didn't realize is that God made her, and he can make somebody else. But that wasn't what the devil was talking about. The devil was saying, you'll not surely die. He just doesn't want you to be like him. And you see, in that situation, it was easier for Eve to believe a counterfeit promise. And sometimes we do that too. Sometimes we do that too. And you see, here's the thing, and trying to deal with that sort of thing. A half-truth, when told as a whole truth, is a lie. And that's exactly what the devil did. And that's exactly what happened in Eve and Adam sinned. And not just then. Sometimes we do it too. As you look at the story of Adam and Eve, surely you see where Adam felt shame. But as you look at the story, he really never expressed a whole lot of guilt, did he? I mean, he was ashamed because of the sin. How do we know that? Well, he went to hide. He went to hide. And they heard the voice of God coming in the garden, and they went and hid. Where are you, Adam? He knew where he was, but he wanted Adam to know that he knew. Where are you? Well, we hid. We don't have any clothes on. Well, who told you about that? We'll never fully understand sin, until we fully understand guilt. Not just shame, but guilt. 4 types of temptation. I didn't originate these. This past week when they're talking about all this money that's going out of state and all this stuff that's going on, they were talking to a psychologist. And they were talking to him about temptation. And I started listening to that, and I listened to it, and I thought, I need to hear that again. And so I put it in reverse, and I backed it up, and I listened to what he said again. And then I backed it up. I listened to it 4 times. I grabbed my phone. I started taking notes. I said, those 4 things, those are really key elements in this process of temptation. That's what really sparked my mind for this lesson. I heard this man, and I don't know who he was, but I think he really nailed it, at least to a degree. There's surely more than 4 types of temptation. We know about the lust of the flesh, lust of the eye, and pride of life. He's not making additions to them. He's trying to help us understand how people make their choices. He said there is the Mount Everest effect. Did any of you see that? The Mount Everest effect. Somebody said, why did you climb that mountain? And there are people that say, well, because it was there. And there are times when, with temptation, there are times when people fall to temptation. Why did you do that? Well, it was just there. A second thing he talked about was the type T mentality. And he says T standing for thrill. He says the thrill of the moment, or the thrill of the experience. Boy, I'm gonna do this, because if I do this, and this is going to be what I'm going to get. There are a lot of times that we fall to temptation because of that. We talked about that not long ago on Wednesday night, some of the things that happen within us during a temptation process. So the type T. And then he talked about the FOMO. Well, what is that? He said the fear of missing out. This probably comes in the line of peer pressure. There are a lot of young people who leave the house intending not to do something wrong, who come home having done something wrong because they were with people who were doing something wrong, and they thought, well, in order to fit into this group, I'm going to have to do it too. And I'd say of the 3 that we've talked about so far, probably this one might be the strongest. There are a lot of people that left their house. They had no intentions of doing whatever it is now that they've done. But there were others who were doing it, and they said, here, you have some too. Kathy Killen was talking the other day about drinking and some of these kinds of things, and talking. This is a primary instance right here where somebody said, hey, this is good, have some. And that fear of missing out is a big driver. And then sometimes it's just fun. Sometimes it's just fun. And that was what they were talking about. The one thing I didn't put up here that I thought was kind of funny, they were interviewing people about these different temptations about going and buying those tickets. One guy at the end said, they said, why did you go up there and buy one? He said, my wife told me to. So I didn't put that one on here, but I guess you could add that for a 5th. But those temptations of the wiles of the devil, the things that he would put out there. Tony Ray read to us. Peter would say, stay alert. Pay attention. Look around. See what's going on. Watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Stand firm against him. Be strong in your faith. There's times when you have to look at somebody and say, I'm not going to do that. Joseph is a great example of that. Society, culture, everything about anything that was going on with the thing with Pharaoh's wife, he could have easily gone ahead and fallen prey He said, I'm not going to do it. How can I do this? How can I do this and sin against God? Stay alert. Watch out. Be strong in your faith. We talked last Wednesday night, and I'm not going to teach that class again. We were talking about the persecution, 1 Peter chapter 4. And two things that came out of that. First of all, there were martyrs. There were people who were killed. And I said then, and I'll say again, there's not a greater lesson that you or I could speak than for somebody to die for what they believe. And the second thing is it caused people to have to be strong and stand up against what was being done that was wrong. You know, that's what God needs from all of us today. The example of Moses, he chose to suffer affliction with the people of God instead of enjoying the pleasures of sin for a season. Let me share with you some advice that God gives us to help us avoid these problems right quick, okay? Let's use the word flee, and let's look at what the Bible says about that. Just about finished. He says flee. 1 Corinthians 6:18, flee what? Flee fornication. In 1 Corinthians 10:14, flee from idolatry. The example in 6:10 in 1 Timothy, those who fall into temptation are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. Verse 11, flee these things and follow after righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, and meekness. 2 Timothy chapter 2, flee youthful lust. Verse 22. And so we see all these times when he says run or flee. Stay away from every kind of evil, 1 Thessalonians 5:18. Let's use this little flee right here, and we'll make 4 words and we'll quit, okay? Let's let the F stand for fear. We need to fear sin. It needs to scare us to death. Sin will send you to hell. We need to fear it. Number 2, we need to leave. There are times that we can't be where we are and remain faithful, so we need to go somewhere else and get away from what's going on there. Don't be there. If you're not there, odds are you're not going to be guilty of what's going on. Let's let the E stands for exit. Find an exit. You know, the Bible says you're not going to be tempted above that which you're able, but with the temptation, there will be a way of escape. Exit, exit, and then escape. Escape the trouble. Escape the heartache. Escape the heartbreak. Flee. Flee. Flee from the devil. And flee from sin. You know, we may not always be able to understand temptation. We know we'll never understand the devil. But God gives us an opportunity here. He says, put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil, and having done all, to stand. The Christian's armor is front-facing. We could much easier face the devil. We can much easier face the devil with the armor of God. Well, thanks for listening. I appreciate that. Again, we may never understand sin, but let's